Hey guys, it's White Cross. Today we're going to be doing a video that's a little bit deeper dive into 999 Silver. If you're new to this, I encourage you to go back and watch our beginner's guide to 999 Silver, a video that kind of explains the basic premises of what is 999 Silver, the most commonly encountered forms of it, and weights and measures, just the basic information. Remember, everybody has to start somewhere. There's nothing wrong with being a beginner and asking the right questions. Hopefully, we're helping you down the road as you learn a little bit more about the vehicles of precious metal ownership. We're going to talk mostly in this intermediate level video about silver bars. These are some of the most commonly encountered silver bars. But before we get into it, I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of my thoughts of silver ownership. I've seen a lot of recently produced kind of interesting shapes, interesting size pieces. Here's a kind of an example. This is a Darth Vader head from a lot of the small Pacific Island countries like Tuvalu and Palau. These items can be interesting, and they might have a sovereign's head on them, like Queen Elizabeth or King Charles now, and they are touted as being money, as coins, because they've actually got a denomination on them. Technically true, but it's important to remember that that's not from the English government. This is not something that's British in nature. These are privately made pieces made for countries that don't have their own mints. In some cases, these countries have as few as a few thousand people in them. Their mints are made, their pieces are made in private mints like the New Zealand mint. There's a mint in Liechtenstein that makes the pieces for Palau. You know, if that's what you're after, if that's what you want, if that's what gets you excited in owning precious metals, that's great. Just keep in mind that for those kind of more interesting, out there, unusual pieces, the number of buyers for them might diminish over time. Not necessarily, but it might. And I think it's a good idea to always have an eye on your exit strategy, no matter how far in the future that's going to be. For me, I hope it's a very long time in the future. But you always have to keep in mind that the more obscure an item you're buying, whether it's because you really, really like it or it's just something that you're drawn to, you're probably going to have fewer buyers in the future that are going to want the same thing. So keep in mind that exit strategy is always important, no matter what it is that you're thinking about. If it's bullion, if it's commodities, if it's anything else that you're talking about, exit strategies, it should be a consideration, not necessarily the determining factor, but something to keep in mind. So let's get right into these bars. I've got some of the most common bars, and we won't be talking about rounds in this video or 1 ounce coins. We're talking about bars in particular. Starting over here on the left, this is a 1 ounce troy ounce silver bar from Engelhard. If you've seen some of the earlier videos, if you follow me online, you know that I'm attracted to the classic vintage bars. I think they're the most interesting part of our hobby right now. So this is a 1 ounce vintage bar. Engelhard stopped making products for consumers 15 or 20 years ago, and these are becoming a little bit more scarce. You don't see so many 1 ounce bars anymore, and I think that has a lot to do with the release of silver coins. The 999 silver coins, like the Canadian Maple Leaf, the Silver Eagle, the New Britannia that have come on the market recently, those 1 ounce silver coins seem to have kind of supplanted the 1 ounce silver bars. You just don't see them as often anymore. I'm a big fan of the silver coins. I think that's a great vehicle if that's what you're interested in. But right now we're talking more about the silver bars. Next up after the 1 ounce is a 5 ounce. This is a vintage Silvertown bar. It's a nice chunky little bar. 5 ounces used to be very popular, and they seem to be kind of going away. It's a bit of a shame. It's a nice weight. It's a really easy thing for a new stacker, somebody who doesn't have a lot of money to buy into. People seem to have kind of leapfrogged right over the 5 ounce bar and gone straight for a 10 ounce bar. This is an example of another Engelhard bar. This is a classic bar, still in its original vinyl. 10 ounce bars make a lot of sense to me, and I think they might make a lot of sense to a lot of people. I think there's a reason why they are gaining so much in popularity. If it's easy to figure out the price of a 1 troy ounce bar or 1 troy ounce coin by going to Kitco or some of the other online resources for what the bullion market is on any given day or even any time during the day, it's a really simple thing to multiply that by 10. So we talked before about a theoretical $20 per ounce price. That may not be what it is right now, but it's great for illustration purposes. This 1 ounce bar has 20 ounces worth of silver. A 10-ounce bar has 10 times that much, so $200 worth of silver. And that's an easy way to keep track of kind of your silver holdings. It also is just a nice thing if you need to sell something quickly. It's easy to sell smaller volumes of silver rather than some of the larger bars. Let's go on to the next larger bar. All of these are minted in troy ounces. Remember, a troy ounce is a little bit heavier than the ounces that we use in common practice for food and things like that. Troy is a very specific weight. It's usually used for precious metals. 1 troy ounce, 5 troy ounce, 10 troy ounce. This is the silver kilo. So this is the odd man out of this group. This is metric. It is 1,000 grams of silver. And I think a kilo is kind of a nice size bar to have. And that's because there are 31.1 grams in a troy ounce. So 1,000 grams is about a 32.15 ounce troy ounce bar. It's significantly larger than the 10 ounce, but it's much, much smaller than the next guy. That's this 100-ounce bar. I think this should satisfy a lot of those urges if you like to have a big chunky bar that you want to hold of. It's not outrageously expensive. At our $20 an ounce illustrative price of silver, a 32-ounce bar, you're talking $650 somewhere in there. So it's not prohibitive. It's a lot of money if you're new. If you're starting out, you don't have a lot of money put into it. But it's probably, for most purposes, I think about the largest bar that most smaller investors should be looking at. And why is that? Because the next guy up is a 100-ounce bar. And I have several 100-ounce bars. They are a great, interesting size and weight. This is a particularly hefty vintage Johnson Matthey bar. This is 100 troy ounces of silver. And bars larger than, say, the kilo bar, for example, have limitations. When you're going to buy it, you can't dollar cost average into a 100-ounce bar. What does that mean? Dollar cost averaging is the idea that rather than buying a set amount, you're buying a set dollar amount. So you're not going to the store and buying a 10-ounce bar. You're buying $100 worth of silver, $200 worth of silver, and you're doing that on a regular basis. Dollar cost averaging lets you take advantage when the price is dropped, but it also limits your exposure if the price is up when you go to buy. So you can dollar cost average into any size bar if you've got the finances, but a smaller bar, it's just a little bit easier, I think, to get into. A 100-ounce bar, you can't really dollar cost average. You're sinking 100 ounces all at once. So at the $20 an ounce price that we're talking about, a 100-ounce bar is going to cost you $2,000 before the premium. Remember, the premium is the amount that you pay over the value of the silver that goes to cover your dealer's spread. It covers the cost of doing business. It might make a little profit for them. So you're going to be paying $2,000 at $20 an ounce, not including the premium. That's a lot of money to put into it. But there's also a cost when you go to sell. Let's say that you need to access $500 for an emergency. After all, that's kind of what physical precious metals holdings are good for. It's kind of having money set aside in case there's an emergency. If you need $500 at $20 an ounce, that means you're talking about selling 20 or 30 ounces of silver. If you have nothing but larger bars like this 100-ounce bar, you've got to exit this entire position. This entire stake has to be liquidated to get you that 20 or 30 ounces worth of silver. What happens if you bought this bar at a particularly high point and now silver prices are down? What if it's only $10 an ounce? And silver has fluctuated quite a bit in the last 10 or 15 years. You're taking a hit, not just on the money that you need to access, but every single ounce of silver that's in this bar has to be liquidated. You can't sell part of a 100-ounce bar. You've got to sell the whole thing. When you go to buy it again, once you've recovered from whatever financial issue that it was, what if the price of silver is up again? So what if you had to sell low, and now that you're going to get back into a silver holding, the price is up again? You're going to take a hit again. So I don't recommend 100-ounce bars for the typical investor. I think a kilo is probably about as big as you should go. And honestly, a 10-ounce bar seems to make a lot more sense for most people. There are 1,000-ounce bars out there also. And if I think that a 100-ounce bar is too big, 1,000-ounce bar is probably too big too. It's not something that I've ever owned. It's not something that I would ever own. It's incredibly exciting to see a 1,000-ounce bar, but for most investors, it just doesn't make sense. So that's a kind of an introduction into the sizes that you're most commonly going to encounter, why I feel the 10-ounce bar is probably the best option if you're not going to buy 1-ounce silver rounds or coins. Maybe a kilo if you want to go a little bit deeper, but that's probably as big as I would go. Some interesting things that have happened to the silver market recently, at least domestically, that's here in the United States. We've seen a proliferation of foreign bars that have come on the market. It used to be, when I first started doing this in earnest in the 80s and 90s, the bars that you were most commonly going to see are Johnson Matthey or Engelhard. That was it. That was pretty much the only options that you have. Now, in the last 10 or 15 years, we've seen a lot more bars coming out from people like Scottsdale, Sunshine Mint, Republic Metals. APMEX has their own line. Those are all quality products. There's nothing wrong with those at all. But there has been an introduction of foreign bars into the market too, and I think that's an indication that interest in physical precious metals is something that's a global phenomenon. It's something that people all around the world are interested in. Asahi is a Japanese company that started releasing a lot into my local area. I come across this quite a bit now. Ital Preziazzi is an Italian bar. I think they're very interesting looking. Geiger, the Austrian company, produces some really high quality products, and I think Geiger bars are really interesting. There's always Pamp and Valcambi. Those are Swiss companies that had released mostly gold up until really recently, and I think their silver products are really starting to move a lot too. One of my local dealers has Istanbul Gold Refinery products. These are kind of old, poor-looking bars, interesting-looking bars. And recently, Germania Mint, which is based in Poland, has started selling a lot. They've got some really interesting designs for their bars. Sovereign mints have started releasing bars too. Back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, if you wanted a bullion product that was made by an actual government mint, the Royal Canadian Mint was really probably the only game in town. Perth Mint also produces some bullion, and that's in Australia, and their products are starting to become a little bit more commonplace too. But the Britannia, the London Mint has really started to make some excellent products that have really started to infiltrate this market. 10-ounce bars all the way up to 100-ounce bars, 100-gram bars all the way up to a kilo. They're beautiful shapes, they're beautiful designs, and the quality of a London Mint product is unsurpassed as far as I'm concerned. So you've got so many different options now. There are no wrong answers. It's whatever you feel is kind of the neatest. But keep in mind, again, that exit strategy. If you're in a rural area, if you don't have a lot of buyers, the more common bars are probably going to be easier to sell. Doesn't mean you're not going to find a buyer with a Germania Mint or an Istanbul Mint product. It just may take you a little bit longer, or you may not recoup some of those premiums that you paid out when you bought the product. So last thing I wanted to touch on is new versus vintage bars. I've said earlier that I'm a big fan of the vintage bars. If you follow me online, you know that I like the vintage bars. Not every bar that you see that looks like an old poor bar is as old as it might look. These types of products have become so popular with collectors that a lot of mints have started releasing bars that look old, even though they're not really old. They're not the extruded bars, the milled bars that you see here. Ironically, these bars are actually quite old now. A lot of the bars on the market now look like these old poor bars. And that's just a collector preference, a buyer preference. They make products to meet a demand in the marketplace, and it looks like people are really trying to pursue those older style bars. Just keep in mind, there's nothing wrong with those bars, but some of them are maybe not as old as they look. So if you're paying a premium for an older bar because you think it's vintage, be very careful. Make sure that what you're buying is an actual vintage bar and not something that was made to kind of look vintage. So that's a kind of an intermediate wrap-up of some of the sizes of 999 silver bars that are available, some of the mints that are on the market now, some of the international companies that are making them, and even some sovereign mints that are making bullion products now. A lot of information to digest. If you have any questions about what we've talked about today, go ahead and drop a question on the comment section below. Please remember to like and subscribe so we have a better idea if we're reaching the right people with the videos that we're making. If there's any suggestions you'd like to see of upcoming videos, leave a comment down below and we'll try to get to that if we've got the information we can help provide. And once again, thank you for allowing us to be a part of your journey as you go deeper into the world of physical precious metals.